Kristian, you mentioned it. Guerschon Yabusele has
Yeah.
not. This signing has not gone well. We're going to get into a little bit of trade chatter right now, and it's going to start with Yabusele. But Brittany, before we get there, I'm just curious, from your standpoint, fan, knower of the game, why hasn't this worked? Why don't we see the Yabusele that was so productive in Philadelphia here in New York?
To me, it's a shocker. I do want to start there. When we signed him, I thought that was our undercover weapon. I thought that was the guy that, yes, when a Shamit goes down or Miles McBride goes down, or even when Towns or Mitch gets into foul trouble or any issues, he'd be up and he'd not only be up, but he'd be shooting the ball efficiently, and that has not happened. I think the biggest issue with him is simply fit. I know there's a lot of people who want to make fun of his weight and put the weight as an issue. I don't think that's necessarily his issue. I think that he doesn't fit with our system. He looks very uncomfortable, and I think mentally, as a player myself, at one point, when you not only don't fit with the system and then you're trying to fit and the games aren't going your well, you start to mentally get into it. And I think right now he's defeated mentally, not only physically, as some may joke, but I think mentally he's not. It's not working for him. He hasn't had an outbreak game yet, and he's a guy that you would think, because he's a veteran. There's times where I'm not mad at Tyler Kolek for making his mistakes, Diawara for making their mistakes. They're still young. They still haven't played a lot of games, but this is a guy who's played in the Olympics at a high level. This is a guy who started for a decent team at the time in the 76ers, where he had a big role. He did play for the Boston Celtics. He played in organizations where when you do get this opportunity, you step up. So to see him not do that, I think it started to not only the fact that he doesn't fit with the system, but I think he's mentally just out of it because the ball has not fallen for him. And when it's hard for a player like himself, where he relies offensively on his game more than defensively, and then the ball's not falling, it's just hard for you to rely on anything else at this time.
Yeah, I mean, look, he showed you what he can do. He's got a resume based on that year in Philly and what he's done, internationally. And I think that when you look at that and you look at this year, this is a blemish for the Knicks front office, because this is a guy who they didn't spend a lot of money in free agency. They didn't have a lot of money to spend, but their biggest tool they used to sign Guerschon Yabusele, and Yabusele was getting a lot of interest from other teams. Denver was right there with the Knicks at the end. So that it's not like other teams had a different read than the Knicks, but when you make that kind of commitment, especially with the player option second year, you're making a significant commitment in this era of second apron and every dollar, mattering, meaning something. And this was so far a miss for the front office, and we'll see where it goes from here. Our guy James Edwards from The Athletic reported that the Knicks are open to moving Yabusele. I confirm that that's true, and I think that that's probably the direction this goes, where Yabusele, the Knicks, they understand it's not working well. And maybe you work together, you try to figure out what the next steps are. But yeah, this is a blemish for the front office this year. Kristian, what's your read on Guerschon and why it hasn't worked?
It's tough, right? And when you think back to what Mike Brown said about learning curves, right, at the beginning of the season in training camp, I don't think it's any surprise that the two players who are still struggling to kind of get acclimated to the system are the ones that Mike Brown mentioned, right, which are Karl-Anthony Towns and Guerschon Yabusele. Both of them are still trying to find their footing. Less so Cat, because he's a star player and he's going to get his touches and he's going to get his rebounds and putbacks off those opportunities, so the numbers might look okay. But at the end of the day, you can tell that both of them are trying to find their way in this system, and that's because, as Mike Brown said, everybody else has pretty firmly defined roles. These guys' roles are a little bit more vague because they have to learn the roles of all 5 positions. That can't be easy, right? As a guard what it is that you have to do. On the wings what it is that you have to do. Hell, even Mitch, as strictly a center, knows exactly what he's got to do on any given possession. When you're a 4-5 and you're a stretch 4-5 and you've got to play so many different roles, you're going to see that these guys are struggling a little bit, right? And you can see that with Yabusele's stat line. That being said, to Ian's point, Brittany echoed the same point. I feel the same way. If you knew you were coming in and playing this style of basketball and you've got film on Yabusele, I didn't think it was going to be a good fit, right, coming into the season, right? I thought it was going to be a little bit tough, and now we're kind of seeing that right now with him being on the outside of the rotation, and that's tough, as Ian mentioned, to be to be the case for the guy that you brought in as your key free agency signing, right? So do you end up moving him? I think things are probably trending in this direction because you want to get some sort of production out of that position, especially if that's going to be another bench guy. Listen, he was brought in to be able to play just as many minutes as a guy like Jordan Clarkson or as a guy like Deuce McBride, right? To kind of be that little bit of reprieve in the front court, and they're not getting that type of production from him. So you got to find a way to replace that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as we get closer there to the February deadline. Teams, talk all year long, but the chatter increases in this part of the calendar. And, you have players in New Orleans who are going to be available given where that team is, looking at, Derek Queen, Jeremiah Fears as guys to continue with, and then maybe moving off some other guys. And so Jose Alvarado's a name we've talked about. The interest remains. Nothing has really changed in terms of the Knicks and Alvarado. Interest is there. If they can find common ground on a deal, I wouldn't be surprised if they got to the finish line there. But these deals are tricky to make, especially, teams. I'm sure Alvarado, if the Pelicans made him available, he'll get interest from many teams. And I would think that the Pelicans, want significant draft compensation back. And that's maybe where things get sticky with the Knicks because they don't have a ton to offer, a couple second-round picks. But I think other guards are also on the radar. Dennis Schroeder. Everybody's looking at Sacramento. Where do the Kings go? Seems like they'll be open for business in trading season. And Schroeder's a guy who played really well for the most part against the Knicks in the postseason. And so to add him would be a big boost. I don't know if the Knicks have the trade capital, though, to do that because you're talking about trading Yabusele, and you're talking about, I don't know, maybe you're trading Pacome Dadier for salary purposes, but then you have to up the ante with draft compensation because you're sending out a player who did not work well for you. And so why would another team be clamoring to trade for that player without draft compensation? So tricky spot, I think, for the Knicks. Kristian, a couple other notes around the league. One is a lot of teams are looking at the Lakers with the expiring deals, the veterans on expiring deals over there in LA as things the Lakers may use in trades to get a significant salary player back. So I think that's something that everybody's keeping an eye on. And then I think Portland, the read there right now is they're looking to improve the roster, they're looking to buy. They're not going to sell anything off. They want to try to upgrade some positions so they could be active too. Trey Murphy III, wonder where he ends up. Portland's got interest. What do you see with the Knicks, though, as we approach the trade deadline here?
Are you trying to sell me on Bronny James to Madison Square Garden? Is that what you're trying to tell me, Ian? Listen, I think the Knicks are in an interesting scenario because things are working well right now, right? It's not like this is my biggest argument with the Giannis trade, right? Because sure, yes, if you could add Giannis Antetokounmpo to this team, would you? You'd be foolish not to because he's one of the best players of all time, and you could see just what type of impact he would have. And if you're able to pair him with Jalen Brunson, God knows how many championships you'd be able to contend for in the next 4 years. But on the flip side of that, what would you have to give up to get him? And what would you have to give up to get any player of real impact, especially considering you don't have any real draft assets, right? So do you want to really tinker or mess with the core that's gotten you here so far? Probably not. You probably want to add maybe just a finishing piece or two, right? But on top of that, as you mentioned, who wants your pieces if they're not working out for you and you don't necessarily have the capacity to overpay because you overpaid to get Mikal. 5 draft picks is a lot. So you don't really have much left. So the Knicks are in a tough spot as it pertains to trading their guys or finding trades that are going to really work out in terms of what they'll be able to offer other teams. But even if they don't make a huge move, I think this team is in a good spot. I don't think we've seen them play remotely close to their best basketball yet. I think you're still waiting for guys to come back from being injured. God knows what this team is going to look like once you have your fully healthy slate of players. And we're seeing Cleveland suffer right now. Right, Cleveland's not even close to being in the mix right now. And if you're able to get to the playoffs healthy and you've got this squad, I think you have a real shot of being able to beat Detroit and go to the NBA Finals for the first time in this century or in 25 plus years. So, I think part of it is, ride with the team that got you here. But if you're able to, part of me is really pulling for Guerschon to kind of figure it out because great guy. You know what I'm saying? We know he's capable of playing at a higher level. It just hasn't worked out here yet. Maybe a couple more games and he'll be able to find his footing. But if you're able to, and it doesn't work out, I'm sure he wants to be happy playing impactful somewhere else too. So if you're able to get a guy and move him, you're off to the races. I just don't think you should really mess with any of your starters or any of your core pieces because this team is playing really well, right? And you kind of want to see what the next level of this thing looks like.